Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reserve Seating. And we are in what I think is going to be at the beginning of a very exciting month because we're calling it Best September Ever. We're celebrating the movies of September 1994. And we are starting with not only one of our favorite guests, Mr. Mike Pomaro. How are you, Mike?
I'm great. And how are you guys?
I'm great too.
Better now.
We're, of course, better now. Of course, better now. And we're gonna do a Mike month next year with Michael Madsen movies because I'm hooked on Michael Madsen's interview podcast. Did I tell you about that, Mike?
No, no.
He interviewed like Michael T. Williamson and Natasha Henstridge, and it's all like the conversation that Costner and Benning have at the end of Open Range, where she's just like, "Yeah, I guess you're a pretty good guy if you get down to the heart of it." And he's just like, "I did a lot of crazy shit." It will be like Natasha Henstridge just like he'll compliment her. He's just like, "You remind me of Carol Lombard. You're so beautiful and intelligent." And then she'll just be like, "Oh, you're so sweet, Michael." And he's like, "Sometimes I see a building and I just know I can break into it." Anyways, but we're also excited to have our first movie that we're discussing be Quiz Show because I think it is, I don't know if I would say underrated, but I think it's under discussed and underseen these days
That's
because it
fair.
sort of falls into that category of Best Picture nominees from 1994. And Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, Shawshank Redemption are the ones that get
Yeah.
most of the conversation. Whereas I think Quiz Show and then to a lesser extent Four Weddings and a Funeral, which is kind of a weird nominee in my opinion,
Yeah.
don't get discussed as much. But Mike, what's your history with Quiz Show?
Quiz Show was, I did not see it theatrically, but I remember renting it. As all these stories start, I rented it with Adam Thoss,
Mhm.
um, and was kind of obsessed with it for a while. I'm a big fan of this movie. I think it's super fun, super
Great.
watchable. Um, and uh, yeah, it was a rental that we rented over and over again.
Did you know Martin Scorsese was in it before you watched it?
I don't remember. I don't think so. I think he's legitimately really good in it,
He's really good at
right?
it.
No, it's astonishing how good him and Barry Levinson are as
Yeah.
actors.
Yeah.
He's like the cold, bitter truth of the movie, and that scene with him and Rob Morrow is just
Yeah.
unbelievable
It's
at
a
the end.
cool scene because you never see, like, I'm thinking, like, maybe, like, I don't know, I guess, like, I'm thinking of his cameo in Taxi Driver. I'm thinking of the other times we've seen him act. And he's not, like, smarmy in the scene, but he is sinister in the scene.
Yeah.
Like, you know
Right.
what I mean? And he's
Yep.
like I guess because we think of Scorsese, or at least I do, as so kind of like avuncular, like you think of him
Yeah.
as just lovable, like you just poke him and he giggles. Like I think of that, and seeing him in this, you're like, oh, he's kind of like the eyebrows are working against us here.
He's 10 steps ahead of Rob Morrow,
Yeah.
and so is, the TV networks and all of the higher powers and everything like that. And it's almost like
It's
a
Ned
really
Beatty in Network.
yeah, it's really interesting as like a counterpoint to the Van Dorens because it's like the Van Dorens are, the elite also, but then they kind of think like, oh, he got caught, he apologized, he could go back to his teaching job. There's like a certain naivete to it. It's like DiCaprio at the end of Killers of the Flower Moon. It's like, no, you have to take the whole thing. You can't
Mm.
take like some of it. You have to take the whole thing. It's like there's that level of elite, and then there's like corporate sponsors, CEOs, TV network executives, things like that. And it's like that's a whole other level of elite that has no responsibility whatsoever and no repercussions. And it's chilling. It's really it for a movie as it still has the dressing of like a 1950s, you know, entertainment quiz show thing.
Right.
But like it's sneaky in how chilling it is by the end of it.
That's what I think is so cool about this movie, is because it is a big Oscar-y movie. Like it's
Mhm.
got that subject matter and it's got those types of performances. Like it reminded me a lot of like a Catch Me If You Can kind of thing, where it's like it's got this like knowing edge to it, but also this very prestige approach. But like its politics are very complex, but not didactic. Like it's not yelling at you about what you should think about the cultural elements and the religious elements and the socio-political elements and the corporate elements, like all the things in it that are incredibly complicated. Like, I love there's that part later. The only time it really approaches it is when there's the congressional panel, and the one congressman says, like, I'm from New York too, but a different side of New York. And you read everything he's saying about the whole plot of the movie just in that one little moment. Like Redford in this movie, it doesn't seem like he's got an axe to grind. It seems like he's just trying to tell this story in a way that is realistic about the injustices, but not necessarily like the John Turturro character is not forced into realizations that in other big Oscar movies would be more obvious.
I completely agree. And to your point, I think like movies like this normally would, you would feel the weight of all those things you just mentioned. And this movie, like at the medium simmer, like you said, still kind of remains, I don't know if fun is the right word, but it's such a watchable movie. Like I don't feel oppressed by all the things you mentioned, but I recognize them. And yeah, I think it's kind of a brilliantly constructed piece of, and like it's a brilliantly constructed kind of like you said, Oscar film with something to say, but also this piece of entertainment at the same time.
It's incredibly crowd pleasing, but also really, really smart.
Yeah, it's smart in the way of being so moral, and that makes it easy for it to be a crowd pleaser. But the thing that I find fascinating about it is, you kind of mentioned, Mike, and Rob, you alluded to, like, that it doesn't have an oppressive, heavy vibe to it at all. And that's really unusual for me for like Robert Redford directed movies.
Yeah.
It's like maybe, and I'm not denigrating like his directing of the movie, because he made a great movie, but maybe it's also an even bigger triumph of like Paul Adonasio's screenplay. And he did Donnie Brasco also. And of course, Disclosure, we have to mention Disclosure.
Of course.
That blew the lid off of sexual harassment and VR in The Office. But I wanted to call him out because I think the screenplay is so smart, and there's so many like layers to what is going on in every scene. I love the Turturro stuff because at first this was maybe my second or third time seeing Quiz Show, and I forget that it's not about just let's get the Jewish guy off the show and elevate the WASP guy. I always forget that he got the answers too, and that final line he has at the end where he's just like, you don't know how to leave a guy alone until you leave a guy alone.
Exactly.
And it's like,
it's such a great team.
It's so great. And then you counterpoint that to Enfield, the David Paymer character, another Jewish guy. And then you've got Rob Morrow, another Jewish guy who wants to be a Van Doren, basically. And then the guy, so it's not even about like race, it's about chasing the money, and it's about like how power structure and classism and things like that. And they do it in such a way that like you could watch it I could watch Quiz Show when I was 12 years old on video and be oblivious to most of it and still be thoroughly entertained. And then like when you get older and you kind of understand the world a little bit more, it like turns into this whole other movie.
Did you guys know Rob Morrow before this movie? Like I was a Northern Exposure guy.
No, not really at all.
I knew that's where he was popular from, but I didn't watch Northern Exposure, which I should have, because John Corbett, I mean, come on.
I don't know if I ever told you the story, but myself and Christy, my wife, were at San Diego Comic-Con in 2015, and she was walking and looked on the ground and found an autograph ticket for, what was that show he did? Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
So she got to meet him for free. Because she found that ticket. She hopped in line, and I was like, oh, you've never seen Northern Exposure? That should be me.
Can we talk about Ralph Fiennes?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't like Ralph Fiennes when I was a kid because I was just like, oh, look at Ralph Fiennes. But like now I'm just like, look at Ralph Fiennes.
Look at Ralph Fiennes in this. It's like the Daniel Craig thing where like when he's younger, his eyes are bluer. In this one, like Ralph Fiennes is like so striking in this. You're just like, I just like got lost like watching the movie and like, I'm sorry, I have to rewind this. He's too handsome. I have to go back and
right. I'd give him the answers too.
I'd give everybody the answers because I'm a big pushover.
I like that the Ralph Fiennes character is aware of his privilege and is forced to
Mhm.
confront it, but not in a way that's unrealistic. Where I love that the guy says to him, like, I don't really think we should be congratulating you just because you said, you told the truth for once. Like, and everybody
Yeah.
starts clapping. The way the movie handles it is part of the reason why this ends up being like an also ran at the Oscars, because it's just there's no big Oscar moment like that that would be such a shoe-in for that kind of recognition, but
Mhm.
the movie would be less for it.
I love all the Ray Fiennes, Paul Scofield stuff so much because it's like as if this movie needed more great things. It's like this wonderful father-son relationship.
Yeah.
Oh,
And there's the stuff at the table when they're eating the cake, and he says the thing about like, you know, I forgot what the setup of it was, but basically it's like, well, what else is there to be, like that brings you joy in life? And he's just like, wait till you have a son.
Yeah.
And it says everything about that relationship. And
yeah.
this would be a weird, good double feature Buena Vista picture style with a goofy movie because it's both about fathers and sons, and the
Yep.
sons disappointing their fathers and the fathers not being able to relate to the sons. Even though Paul Scofield's character is this poet and he's so like worldly and educated and everything like that, he's a novice to this whole TV thing. And then he's like resisting it at first and he's just like, I don't really want to watch it. And then somebody gifts him the TV and they throw it in the den and he becomes hooked on watching his son like be, just elevated because of his intellect or what he thinks is that. And just like the deception of, I don't know, it's just, there's like nothing more cinematic than like, I'm a dad and I'm disappointed in you.
This movie could have used a Powerline song, though. I will say it.
Yeah.
The one thing this movie's missing.
Yeah.
So like at
That
the
was it.
end when he says, so he's like, what are you going to do, Charlie? And then he says, well, I'm going to tell the truth. And then he goes, well, for the first time ever, we're finally seeing things eye to eye. And then they sing eye to eye with Powerline.
Am I gonna watch the Goofy movie tonight? I think I'm gonna watch it.
I've had it on the brain because it was yeah, there you go.
I felt for John Turturro the how he had to go out on the Marty question, and I was thinking like if they were like, okay, we're gonna ask you who is the starting first baseman for the 2005 White Sox, and you have to say Herbert Perry, I'd be like, no, 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 no. You got to ask me literally anything else. Like I cannot. I felt that. Like
It's like how Affleck refused to wear the Yankees cap in Going Girl. He's like, no, I'm not doing that.
All right, so it was nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Paul Scofield. He was up against Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, Gary Sinise in Forrest Gump, Chaz Palminteri in Bullets Over Broadway, and the winner was Martin Landau and Ed Wood.
It's a good win.
That's a tough category.
It's a tough category. It's a good win.
It was nominated for Best Director, Robert Redford. Also nominated Woody Allen, Bullets Over Broadway, Quentin Tarantino, Pulp Fiction, Krzysztof Kieslowski, The Three Colors trilogy, Red, and Robert Zemeckis, Forrest Gump winner. Screenplay from previously produced or published material.
Mm-hmm.
It was nominated Paul Atanasio, Quiz Show, also Alan Bennett for Madness of King George, Frank Darabont for Shawshank Redemption, Robert Benton for Nobody's Fool, and the winner was Eric Roth for Forrest Gump.
Hindsight is easy, but you can see how Forrest Gump just came in and whatever Forrest Gump. I mean, whatever. We don't have to get into it, but like that's exactly the kind of movie that Quiz Show isn't. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah,
like, however, I'm not saying good, bad, whatever. It's like that's exactly the opposite of this movie.
yeah, absolutely.
We'll be back with another review next week. One of the other great September 1994 movies.
Yes.
So until next time,
I'm giving you all the answers.
Jarrett's all cures tired blood.
They said tiger blood.